Language Foundations Vocabulary Flashcards, helping you achieve understanding.
Subject to torture. The deliberate, systematic, or wanton infliction of physical or mental suffering by one or more persons in an attempt to force another person to yield information or to make a confession or for any other reason. Extreme mental distress. Torment emotionally or mentally. The act of distorting something so it seems to mean something it was not intended to mean. Unbearable physical pain. Intense feelings of suffering. Acute mental or physical pain. Subject to torture. Torment emotionally or mentally. Treat cruelly. The children tormented the stuttering teacher. Subject to torture. The sinners will be tormented in hell, according to the Bible. Extreme mental distress. The act of harassing someone. Torment emotionally or mentally. Unbearable physical pain. A severe affliction. A feeling of intense annoyance caused by being tormented. So great was his harassment that he wanted to destroy his tormentors. Intense feelings of suffering. Acute mental or physical pain. The torments of the damned. The deliberate, systematic, or wanton infliction of physical or mental suffering by one or more persons in an attempt to force another person to yield information or to make a confession or for any other reason. It required unnatural torturing to extract a confession. Extremely painful. Cause emotional anguish or make miserable. Extreme mental distress. Extreme distress of body or mind. Suffer great pains or distress. An instrument of torture that stretches or disjoints or mutilates victims. Torment emotionally or mentally. A support for displaying various articles. The newspapers were arranged on a rack. Go at a rack. A rapid gait of a horse in which each foot strikes the ground separately. The destruction or collapse of something. Rack and ruin. Obtain by coercion or intimidation. Run before a gale. A form of torture in which pain is inflicted by stretching the body. Draw off from the lees. Rack wine. Fly in high wind. Framework for holding objects. Put on a rack and pinion. Rack a camera. Rib section of a forequarter of veal or pork or especially lamb or mutton. Seize together, as of parallel ropes of a tackle in order to prevent running through the block. Stretch to the limits. Rack one's brains. Torture on the rack. Work on a rack. Rack leather. A change for the worse. The act of distorting something so it seems to mean something it was not intended to mean. A shape resulting from distortion. An optical phenomenon resulting from the failure of a lens or mirror to produce a good image. A change, usually undesired, in the waveform of an acoustic or analog electrical signal. The difference between two measurements of a signal, as between the input and output signal. Heavy metal guitar players use vacuum tube amplifiers to produce extreme distortion. The mistake of misrepresenting the facts. The act of distorting something so it seems to mean something it was not intended to mean. An intense or violent exertion. The act of distorting something so it seems to mean something it was not intended to mean. Taxing to the utmost. Testing powers of endurance. His final, straining burst of speed. The act of distorting something so it seems to mean something it was not intended to mean. Marked by repeated turns and bends. The act of rotating rapidly. It broke off after much twisting. Intense feelings of suffering. Acute mental or physical pain. An agony of doubt. A state of acute pain. A casualty to military personnel resulting from combat. An injury to living tissue, especially an injury involving a cut or break in the skin. Hurt the feelings of. The act of inflicting a wound. Cause injuries or bodily harm to. A figurative injury, to your feelings or pride. He feared that mentioning it might reopen the wound. Put in a coil. Hurt the feelings of. Cause injuries or bodily harm to. Cause damage or affect negatively. The act of persecuting, especially on the basis of race or religion. Psychological suffering. The death of his wife caused him great distress. The seizure and holding of property as security for payment of a debt or satisfaction of a claim. Originally, distress was a landlord's remedy against a tenant for unpaid rents or property damage, but now the landlord is given a landlord's lien. Bring into difficulties or distress, especially financial hardship. A state of adversity, danger or affliction or need. A ship in distress. Cause mental pain to. The news of her child's illness distressed the mother. Extreme physical pain. The patient appeared to be in distress. The act of damaging something or someone. Feel physical pain. Were you hurting after the accident? Cause emotional anguish or make miserable. A damage or loss. Feelings of mental or physical pain. Any physical damage to the body caused by violence or accident or fracture, etc. Feel pain or be in pain. Hurt the feelings of. She hurt me when she did not include me among her guests. Psychological suffering. Damaged. Used of inanimate objects or their value. Suffering from physical injury, especially that suffered in battle. Ambulances for the hurt men and women. Be the source of pain. Cause damage or affect negatively. Our business was hurt by the new competition. Give trouble or pain to. This exercise will hurt your back. Feelings of mental or physical pain. Psychological suffering. Misery resulting from affliction. Very unhappy, full of misery. A message of hope for suffering humanity. A state of acute pain. Troubled by pain or loss. Suffering refugees. Cause emotional anguish or make miserable. It pains me to see my children not being taught well in school. A symptom of some physical hurt or disorder. The patient developed severe pain and distension. Cause bodily suffering to and make sick or indisposed. Emotional distress. A fundamental feeling that people try to avoid. The pain of loneliness. A somatic sensation of acute discomfort. As the intensity increased, the sensation changed from tickle to pain. Something or someone that causes trouble. A source of unhappiness. A bothersome, annoying person. That kid is a terrible pain. The act of rendering something false is by fraudulent changes of documents or measures, etc., or counterfeiting. A willful perversion of facts. The act of determining that something is false. Any evidence that helps to establish the falsity of something. A misleading falsehood. A willful perversion of facts. A symptom of some physical hurt or disorder. One who suffers for the sake of principle. Torture and torment like a martyr. Kill as a martyr. Saint Sebastian was martyred. One who voluntarily suffers death as the penalty for refusing to renounce their religion. Torture and torment like a martyr. Torture and torment like a martyr. A person employed to keep watch for some anticipated event. A form of military punishment used by the British in the late 17th century in which a soldier was forced to stand on one foot on a pointed stake. A wooden strip forming part of a fence. A detachment of troops guarding an army from surprise attack. A protester posted by a labor organization outside a place of work. A vehicle performing sentinel duty. Fasten with a picket. Picket the goat. Serve as pickets or post pickets. Picket a business to protest the layoffs. A form of military punishment used by the British in the late 17th century in which a soldier was forced to stand on one foot on a pointed stake. A card game for two players using a reduced pack of 32 cards. A form of psychological torture inflicted by questioning the victim for hours. A form of torture in which the soles of the feet are beaten with whips or cudgels. A cudgel used to give someone a beating on the soles of the feet. Beat somebody on the soles of the feet. A form of psychological torture inflicted by depriving the victim of sleep. A form of torture in which the hands are tied behind a person's back and they are lifted off the ground by a rope tied to their wrists, then allowed to drop until their fall is checked with a jerk by the rope. A form of torture in which the hands are tied behind a person's back and they are lifted off the ground by a rope tied to their wrists, then allowed to drop until their fall is checked with a jerk by the rope.
Become our student and get access to effective and free educational materials. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to become a part of our growing YouTube community and to learn English effectively.